There are people who understand, from the very beginning of their tenure, in a position of authority, that the authority is incidental, that what they have been given, the room, the roster, the daily access, the trust of a community that has delivered its children to their care, is a container, and that what they are going to fill that container with is something the community has not anticipated and would not have authorized if they had been told. Prudence Holt was 34 years old when she arrived in Pike County, Kentucky in 1908 to take the teaching position at the Freeburn Community School. She was 38 when the investigation that removed her from that position began in 1912. In those 4 years, she shaped the children in her classroom in ways that parents described, when investigators finally asked them to describe it, as difficult to distinguish from ordinary teaching until you laid the whole 4 years out and looked at all of it together. Individually, the things she did were unusual but explicable. Together, they described a woman who had arrived in Freeburn with a specific project and had been executing that project, child by child, year by year, with the patience and the precision of someone who understood exactly what she was doing and exactly how long she had before someone looked at all of it together and understood it too. Drop your location in the comments and tell me where you are watching from tonight, because the schoolhouse at Freeburn, Pike County, Kentucky is a real place that a real woman taught in for 4 years, and the children she taught, the children whose development she shaped in the specific direction she chose, grew up in that community. And their children are there now, and what she put into those classrooms in those 4 years did not stop operating when she left. Pike County in the years before the First World War was a county being transformed by coal. The railroad had come. The company towns were being established along the creek bottoms. The old farming communities on the ridges above the company operations were caught between two economies and between two versions of what a future in eastern Kentucky might look like. The Freeburn Community School served a population of children from both the Old Ridge families and the newer arrivals in the coal economy, a mix of backgrounds and expectations that the school board had been managing, imperfectly, for years before Prudence Holt arrived with credentials from a normal school in Ohio and letters of recommendation that were uniformly excellent, and that would later, when examined more carefully, prove to have been written by people who could confirm that she had completed her training, and who could not be found for follow-up questions because several of them had left their positions or moved without current addresses available. She was a tall woman, composed in her bearing, with a quality of deliberate attention to whoever she was speaking with that adults in the community found impressive and children found. In the words of a former student interviewed by the state investigation in 1912 at the age of 14, like she was looking for something you hadn't shown anyone yet. This description, from a child describing a memory 4 years old, was noted by the investigator as one of the more precise characterizations he had collected. What Prudence Holt was looking for was the thing she found in her first month in each new year. The children who were, as she determined through the weeks of early observation that she conducted with the careful methodology of someone running a selection process, the most susceptible to the particular form of instruction she was prepared to provide. She did not teach them differently on the surface. The content of her classroom instruction was standard. The curriculum she reported to the school board was standard. What she provided in addition to the standard curriculum, what she gave to the 6 to 8 children per year that her selection process identified, was not reported to the school board and was not part of any curriculum that any normal school in Ohio or anywhere else had authorized her to deliver. The first parent to bring a formal complaint was a woman named Edna Blackwell, whose daughter Cora had been in Holt's classroom for 2 years and who had, by the autumn of 1910, developed a quality in her thinking and her speech that Edna Blackwell could not name precisely, but that she described to the school board as not being Cora's own. She said her daughter had always been a particular kind of child, specific in her opinions, direct in her expression, recognizably herself in a way that Edna Blackwell had been watching for 9 years and knew as well as she knew her own face. She said that quality had changed in the second year. that Cora's opinions were now less specific and less direct, that her self-recognition had become more generalized, that she spoke in ways that Edna Blackwell sometimes recognized as coming from somewhere other than her own daughter's thinking. She said she did not know how to explain this more precisely than that. The school board received Edna Blackwell's complaint and discussed it in a meeting at which Prudence Holt was present. Holt was professional and calm. She described Cora Blackwell as a good student with excellent development in abstract reasoning, and she offered the opinion that what Edna Blackwell was observing was the normal consequence of intellectual development in an able child, that children who were developing well often appeared to their parents as changed, because the development was real and produced a different way of engaging with the world. The school board accepted this explanation. Edna Blackwell left the meeting unsatisfied but without a counter-argument that the board found persuasive. She went home and she watched her daughter for another 2 years. She kept notes. She dated the entries. She did not share the notes with anyone until 1912 when a second parent, a man named John Tierney whose son Raymond had been in Holt's classroom, came to her because he had heard she had complained in 1910 and he had the same complaint in 1912. The two parents sat together and compared what they had observed. The comparison produced a picture that was more specific than either parent's individual observation had been, because the patterns that had been ambiguous in one child's development became clear when matched against the parallel patterns in a second child's development. The picture they assembled between them in an afternoon in the Blackwell kitchen was the picture they brought to the Pike County School Board superintendent the following week. The State Department of Education sent an investigator. The investigator spent 3 weeks in Freeburn in the autumn of 1912. He interviewed 41 people, parents, students, current and former, community members who had regular interaction with the school. He did not interview Prudence Holt until the 3rd week, because he wanted the full picture before he sat across from her. What the first 2 weeks of interviews produced in his assessment was a picture of classroom instruction that looked entirely normal in its reported form and that produced, in a specific subset of children, not all children, not random children, a specific subset selected by identifiable criteria, a particular developmental outcome that the parents of those children recognized as a change and that the parents of children not in that subset did not observe in their own children. The selection criteria, as the investigator identified them from the pattern of which children were and were not affected, were documented in his report. The developmental outcome was documented in his report. Both sections are in the sealed portion of the report, which is in the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives, in the Education Records Collection, sealed since its filing in November 1912. The public-facing portion of the investigator's report states that Prudence Holt had engaged in irregular educational practices not consistent with her teaching license and not authorized by the Pike County School Board, and that her license should be revoked, and that she should not be relicensed in any Kentucky school district. The report also states that the developmental effects observed in the affected children were being monitored by the state in coordination with the families involved, and that appropriate follow-up would be conducted. No follow-up documentation has been found in the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives. Whether the follow-up occurred and the records are lost, or whether the follow-up was not conducted, is not clear from what remains. Prudence Holt's license was revoked in December 1912. She left Pike County before the revocation was formally served, which suggests she had been informed of the investigation's conclusions before the official communication reached her. She does not appear in teaching records for Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, or Virginia in any subsequent year. She does not appear in census records for those states after 1910, when she is listed at a Freeburn address. She was 38 years old in 1912. She had been at Freeburn for 4 years. Before Freeburn, her employment history, according to the investigation's inquiries to the Ohio Normal School and to the school districts that had issued her recommendations, was partially documented but showed 2 gaps of approximately 1 year each, in 1903 and in 1906. during which her professional whereabouts were not accounted for by any institution she was associated with. The children she selected across 4 years of teaching at Freeburn, the 6 to 8 per year that the selection process identified, grew up in Pike County in the most cases. They grew into adults who were described by the people who knew them as different in a way that was difficult to specify. Different in the way that Edna Blackwell had described her daughter in 1910 with the precision of a parent who had been watching the same face for 9 years. Whether the thing Prudence Holt put into those classrooms continued to develop in those people as they aged, whether what she gave them in the specific developmental period of early childhood produced effects across a lifetime that she had anticipated and intended, is not a question that any available document answers. The sealed investigator's report presumably addresses it. The sealed report is in the archives. The follow-up that was promised was not found. The children are in the ground now. Their children are in Pike County. And somewhere in a sealed November 1912 report in the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives is a description of what Prudence Holt was, selecting for and what she was building in those selected children, and what the developmental outcome looked like when you assembled 41 accounts and laid them alongside each other and saw the pattern that 2 parents had been the first to find sitting together in a kitchen on an afternoon when they finally compared notes. What do you think she was building? Drop it in the comments. The sealed report has the investigator's answer. The question is whether his answer and yours are the same, and whether either of you is right about what a woman who left no forwarding address in 1912 had been constructing child by child in a schoolroom in Pike County for 4 years. Some teachers shape children toward the world that exists. Some shape children toward something they alone can see. The mountains drew both kinds. Only one kind leaves sealed reports in state archives. Stay with us. The archives are deep, and the sealed sections are never the unimportant ones. Edna Blackwell's notes from the period 1910 to 1912, the dated entries she kept while watching her daughter and not sharing with anyone until John Tierney came to her, are in the Pike County Historical Society's collection, donated by Edna Blackwell's granddaughter in 1978. They are publicly accessible. They have been accessed 3 times since their donation, according to the Society's log. The content of the notes is, in the granddaughter's donation letter, described as observations her grandmother made about family life during a difficult period and material of historical interest to the community's educational history. The granddaughter did not specify further. The donation letter is attached to the collection finding aid. The notes cover 22 months of dated entries. They are organized by date, and they cover, as the donation letter indicates, observations of family life. What they actually cover, what Edna Blackwell was watching so carefully across 22 months and recording with dates, is the behavioral and cognitive development of her daughter Cora as it changed under Prudence Holt's instruction. The entries are not clinical. They are a mother's observations written in a mother's language, which is sometimes more precise than clinical language, because it is not constrained by the available professional vocabulary and must find its own words for what it sees. The entries describe Cora. They describe the ways in which Cora was changing. They describe Edna's attempts to reach the part of Cora that she recognized as her daughter, the part that was direct and specific and recognizably herself, and the ways in which that reach sometimes found purchase and sometimes did not. The later entries from 1911 and 1912 describe what Edna Blackwell characterized as the 2 Coras, the one who was fully present and fully herself, who appeared in moments of physical activity or of strong, immediate emotion, and the one who was there the rest of the time, who spoke in ways that came from somewhere Edna could not locate, who engaged with the world through a filter that had not been there before 1909. The last entry before the meeting with John Tierney reads, "She is 9 years old. She has been in that classroom for 2 years. I do not know what has been done to her in that room, but I know that it is still being done. because the room closed around whatever it did, and it is still working. I am not going to wait any longer to say something to someone who has the authority to act. I have the notes. The notes are dated. I am going to take them to someone tomorrow. She took them to John Tierney the next day, not to an authority, to another parent. Because the authority had already dismissed her once in 1910, and she needed to confirm what she was seeing before she went back. And John Tierney confirmed it, in the way that two parents comparing notes about a shared experience confirm it. Not the confirmation of people who have agreed in advance on a story, but the confirmation of people who find, to their shock and relief, that the thing they thought they were seeing alone, they were not seeing alone. The notes are in Pike County. 3 researchers have read them in 46 years. The investigator's report is, in Frankfort, in the State Archives, sealed, the 2 chorus that Edna Blackwell described in 22 months of dated entries, the one fully present and fully herself, and the one who engaged through a filter placed there by a classroom in 1909 and 1910. Cora Blackwell grew up with both of them, and whether they remained distinct across her lifetime or whether one eventually absorbed the other is a question the Historical Society collection does not answer, because the notes stop in 1912 when the investigation began and Edna Blackwell apparently stopped keeping them once she had given the notes to someone with the authority to act. The follow-up that the state promised was never documented as having occurred. The children are in the ground. Their children are in Pike County. And whatever Prudence Holt built in those classrooms across 4 years is still working. In whatever form it takes 40 years, 60 years, 80 years after the original construction, still working in the specific way that Edna Blackwell described in her last dated entry, closed around what was done, still in operation inside children who grew up, and had children who grew up, and had no way to know they carried what they carried, or where it came from. Subscribe if this is the kind of case that finds the part of your thinking that does not go quiet easily. There are more of them. Some of them have sealed reports, and some of them have dated notes in a historical society. The available records are never the full story, but they are enough to show you the shape of the thing, and sometimes the shape is enough to know you are looking at something real. Keep your eyes open. Not every classroom teaches what it says it teaches. There is one final element of the Prudence Holt case that I want to leave with you, and it is the element that the available summaries consistently overlook, because it is not in the investigator's sealed report or in Edna Blackwell's dated notes, but in a very brief piece of correspondence that is in neither archive. It is in the collection at the Pike County Courthouse, in the miscellaneous correspondence file for 1913, in a folder that has been examined so rarely that the archivist who described the collection to a researcher in 2015 did not know it existed. It is a letter written in January 1913 from Prudence Holt to the Pike County School Board, not requesting reinstatement, not disputing the revocation. The letter is 4 paragraphs. It thanks the school board for the years she spent in the community. It expresses what it describes as genuine care for the children she taught. And then, in the 3rd paragraph, it says something that the school board apparently received, read, and filed without responding to, because there is no response in the correspondence folder. The 3rd paragraph reads, "In its entirety, I want the board to know that the children I worked with most closely during my time in Freeburn received something from their time in my classroom that they will carry their entire lives. I worked carefully to ensure that what they received would be durable and would develop in them over time rather than diminishing. The board may not understand the value of what was given. I hope that over time, when the value becomes visible in those children as they grow, the board and the community will understand that what I did in that room was not done carelessly or with indifference to the children's welfare. It was done with great care and with a long view that I could not fully explain to you at the time and cannot fully explain now. Durable, developing over time rather than diminishing. A long view. These are the words of a woman who built something in a classroom and left it running and wrote to the school board 4 months after her license was revoked to tell them that it was still running and would continue to develop in the children who had received it, and that the value would become visible over time. She wrote this to the body that had revoked her license, knowing they could not act on it, knowing the children were already in possession of whatever she had given them, knowing that the long view she could not explain was already in operation in 6 to 8 children per year of her 4-year tenure, between 24 and 32 children in total who were growing up in Freeburn, Pike County, with something durable in them that she had put there carefully and with a long view. The letter is in the courthouse file. It is in the folder that the archivist did not know existed. It is not restricted. It has not been frequently examined. And the children who received what it describes, the 24 to 32 children who were in Prudence Holt's selected group across 4 years, grew up and had children, and those children grew up, and the long view she described is still out there developing in Pike County and wherever those families went. She said it would be durable. She said it would develop over time. She wrote it to a school board that filed the letter and did not respond. And she was right that they did not understand. And she was right that she could not explain it to them. And she left it in a letter in a courthouse folder and walked out of Pike County in the winter of 1912 and was never found again. The durable thing is still there. She designed it to be.